Hey guys, thanks for bearing with me as I try to figure out how I want to review movies here on YouTube. But in the meantime, here's another thing I'm going to try out. Basically, what I'm thinking with this is that because of my limited schedule, it makes more sense to make one video a week as opposed to anywhere between 2 and 6 depending on how the week goes. So I'll cover every movie that I've seen that I haven't already reviewed each week. I might go back on a movie I've already talked about if I see it again and have more to talk about upon a second, third, fourth viewing, etc, etc. While this week wasn't too busy for me, I'm gonna start in alphabetical order with this first-time feature from Dan Trachtenberg is a great small-scale blockbuster that for the most part worked really, really well. It really doesn't have much to do with J.J. Abrams' Cloverfield and probably could have stayed as a standalone movie, but judging the movie itself, I think is a great suspenseful drama. The thing that truly stands out about 10 Cloverfield Lane are the two central performances from Mary Elizabeth Winstead and John Goodman, who deliver extremely fitting but nevertheless impressive performances. Goodman especially really delivers as this man who clearly has something off about him, and his larger-than-life scale really brings some presence to the character. The direction is very good at making you feel trapped in this small quarter space, though there really isn't a lot of truly interesting camera work. The editing is tight and the pacing is fantastic for a film like this. Several scenes came up where I really didn't know what was going to happen, mainly centering around Goodman thanks to his character-driven performance. And I was drawn in for the first 2 acts of the film. By the time we get to the 3rd act, however, the film doesn't feel as focused as the first 2, and feels a bit more like an entirely different movie, and it did take me out of the tension-fueled immersion that I was in. Despite that though, I do very much recommend this film, mainly to see the great performances, and those first 2 acts really are excellent. It's just a shame they had to go as out there as they did with the 3rd act to try and connect it to the franchise in a story that felt almost entirely separate from anyway. My grade for 10 Cloverfield Lane is a B+. Now, I absolutely love Borat, as a lot of people do, but Sacha Baron Cohen hasn't had an all-out hit for me since then. His work has just started to get old for me, and he always seems to mug to the camera. I mainly take issue with his non-mockumentary style films, so as you can imagine, I wasn't all that excited for the brothers Grimsby, and after seeing it, my fears were very realistic. It's basically Kingsman: The Secret Service as directed by Tom Green, resulting in the hardest movie to watch I've seen so far in 2016. Yet again, Baron Cohen is using his character acting talent for movies whose writing is just awful and pandering to fans of gross-out humor and people who liked Borat for all the wrong reasons. This movie was just an absolute mess that I hated watching. I think the main reason as to why this movie isn't as funny as the other movies is because Baron Cohen is an extremely talented character actor, and the character he is given here is just very flat, and in a movie that already isn't as bombastic as Borat or even Bruno, it does really knock it down a few pegs. I laughed a total of 1 time during the movie, and in a movie packed with jokes, that really speaks leaps and bounds as to why this movie just isn't good. It's weird too, because the movie has flashbacks to when these 2 brothers were kids growing up together until they were separated. These scenes are played out straight, with no jokes in them at all, and feel taken from an entirely different movie. Also, the editing in this film is messy as hell. Almost every scene cuts insanely early, and instead of naturally transitioning from scene to scene, we just cut from set piece to set piece with little attention on the timing of a joke. The jokes aren't drawn out, but instead they're just cut way too early. I could probably edit this film better, and I've only taken 2 film courses at a school that's not focused on the subject. The real problem is that the direction and writing are extremely juvenile and not in a fun way. 13-year-old boys who don't have a full understanding as to what makes a good comedy will probably love this movie because of how far it goes with its gross-out humor. I was the only one in my theater, so during the many scenes that just aimed to make the audience uncomfortable come up, I had no problem whatsoever taking my phone out and just checking Facebook until the scene was over. If you want an extreme example of the style of comedy this movie has to offer, then know that there was a scene where Baron Cohen and Mark Strong hide inside a female elephant's vagina and have to pleasure a male elephant while inside. If that sounds funny to you, I'm not sure our senses of humor match up, but you might enjoy this, I guess? I, on the other hand, did not enjoy this at all, besides 1 laugh. My grade for the brothers Grimsby is an F. I've been hearing a lot about this one and just how excellent it is, and it recently won Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars. So going into this one, I will admit that I had very high expectations, and thankfully most of them were very well met. The central performance from Gerza Rohrig powers through this movie excellently, and you get a vast understanding of who this man is and just what the system of the Holocaust did to people. In fact, a huge part of this film is just how unflinchingly realistic and brutal it depicts concentration camps, and that brutality is anything but unearned. The film isn't just trying to be the new extreme for how much evil we can show for shock factor. and instead uses it in the same way that something like 12 Years a Slave did for the system of slavery. It shows you just how tight the system at these camps were, and it's gripping. At several scenes I was in shock at the horrors men committed, as well as the character's dedication to doing one simple thing that could potentially be for nothing. Saul is a very disturbed man who has gone through a lot of horror, and we are put precisely in his situation thanks to first-time director Laszlo Nemes's choice to keep the camera very close to its subject. It makes you feel right there with him watching these horrors happen from a close distance, but they are never directly in focus, in the same way that Saul himself tries to avoid looking right at the acts of evil being perpetrated around him, and that he may also be involved in. It's a difficult watch, and the pace may be just a tiny bit too slow, but the ending scenes genuinely had me on the edge of my seat because I honest to God didn't know how the film would end. It's necessary viewing, and makes a strong case to be one of the best Holocaust films put in theaters to date. My grade for Son of Saul is an A. I had a good time with this latest Disney animated film, but like several of their recent films, it lacks a lot of that magic to it that their classics give me. Like I said, I enjoyed the movie. The voice acting is very fun, and most of the action scenes are very entertaining and play with this very wonderfully detailed environment. A lot of thinking went into how the city of Zootopia works, and it paid off in a very entertaining way. I loved seeing how this town works. That and I do see this as just the tiniest bit of an important movie, primarily for kids. The movie does have a racial reading into it, as well as a movie on the interaction between police and the public, and it's a very timely message for kids to hear, and it does a great job at teaching those messages to kids in a way that won't go over their heads while not being dumbed down. I was impressed by the writing of this movie. It's not anything phenomenal, and I saw a lot of it coming at least 30 minutes before it happened, but when it is being a clever animal-centered buddy cop movie and during those messages to kids, the script shines. The two leads, Jennifer Goodwin and Jason Bateman, give great vocal performances, and while the rest of the cast does a good job in their roles, they feel much more separate from each other than the other two. Ultimately, though, it is a very predictable family movie that follows a lot of buddy cop cliches. It also jams Shakira into the movie unnecessarily, and it feels awfully forced in, only to pay off at the end when her character performs this big hit song that isn't a great one, to be honest, and just acts as an end credit song. Truth be told, if someone told me this was a DreamWorks movie, I'd probably believe them. It's a good timely movie that doesn't really blend in with Disney's general style, and while it is very predictable, it is still an overall fun time, and I think it's a good movie for kids to see. My grade for Zootopia is a B. Thanks for watching, and if you liked the video, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you want to watch more of my stuff as it comes out. Did you see any of these movies? Let me know what you thought about them by leaving a comment, and also let me know if you like this style of video more than what I was doing before. If you want to really help me out, please share this video and consider becoming a patron on my Patreon campaign. Thanks again, friends. Stay spectacular.